Welcome back to the show. Today I want to share some thoughts with you about trying to win with people. And you're going to say, John, what are you talking about, win with people? The older I get, I realize that many situations in your life, whether it's in the workplace or at the family or in social events, it doesn't really matter how smart you are. It does matter, however, how you and I interact with people that will get you the most mileage out of relationships, whether it is, again, at work, with the family, or in social events. I want to share 8 concepts that were written by Susan Young on 8 ways to shine a positive light on other people. And then I want to share some concepts from Dr. John Maxwell about some of his ideas on how to bring out the best in other people. So this again is by Susan Young. Number 1, let the other person appear smart. Let the other person appear smart. The person who desperately tries to be the smartest person in the room inevitably comes off as the least. When I was young, I thought that if I wanted to impress somebody, that I had to be the smartest person in the room. The older I've gotten, from where I was younger to now older, a lot older than I used to be, obviously, I realized that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, I want to have smarter people around me in any situation, in any environment. How many situations have you been in? How many conversations have you been in where somebody in the room comes off as the most intelligent? They regurgitate, they vomit all this knowledge to prove to you and to prove to the people in the room that they're the smartest person in the room. That to me is not really a sign of the smartest person in the room. That to me is a sign of this person has a big, big ego. Whereas to pull the knowledge from other people, pull the experiences from other people, and leverage that information, that's a good sign of a person who's truly smart. Number 2 idea from Susan Young. Don't bring attention to anything which may embarrass another person. Whether your conversation partner has poor grammar, a pimple on his chin, or lacks social grace, a discreet person does not say or do anything which would make another feel ashamed, embarrassed, or humiliated. Allow the other person to maintain his own grace and dignity. It's really, really easy to point out the faults in other people in public, or in a situation where strangers around the situation are now going to have an opinion of this other person when they don't really have the whole story. I've been going through that in different parts of my life, where people judge what they see and what they think they understand without having all the facts at all. So maybe you're tempted to slam a person verbally in a social environment. Susan Young suggests that maybe you not do that for the sake of the other person. Number 3, ask their opinions. Seek their advice. Ask them inquiring questions. By allowing them to reveal their opinions and knowledge, you have demonstrated respect and made them feel important. I'll tell you something that I've learned a long time ago, that people respond best when you ask them questions versus giving them statements. Let me say it again. People respond best many times when you ask them questions instead of giving them statements of fact. Meaning, you need to do this and you need to do that, instead of asking questions. Maybe, have you ever considered this? And what's your opinion about this? And what if this happened? How would you deal with that? That tends to work a whole lot more than dictating sometimes, not all situations, but sometimes dictating what they need to do at that moment. Because as you know, some people will rebel against that kind of attitude. Number 4, practice patience. That's a tough one for me. I'm not a patient guy at all. Practice patience, Susan Young says. Sometimes it takes a person a moment to gather his or her thoughts, process information, and respond appropriately. Your patience is respectful and appreciated. Let me share a PS to Susan Young's statement there. There is a segment of the population that does not respond well to extemporaneous or instant conversation, meaning if you ask them a question, they're not going to come back at you very quickly. It's a smaller demographic, but these people need a little time to process information. When you and I have the ability to learn the types of people that are around us daily, then we can learn how they're wired, how they think, how they function, and then deal with them in a way that brings out the best in them. Because oftentimes you and I walk into relationships expecting everybody in the room or in the environment to be like you or to be like me. That's really unfair. In fact, that's pretty egotistical to think that everybody in your world, in your circle, in your workplace, in your little group, in your social events, is just like you, so they should understand how you're coming across. When according to the experts, it's not, you shouldn't be thinking that way at all. You should try to respond in a way that they will understand, not necessarily get them to understand you, but talk to them and converse with them and to build a relationship with them in a way that they can understand, right? Susan Young goes on to say number 5, maintain your calm. Rather than react with anger or defensiveness, regulate your response and shift the energy into a more positive direction. That's hard sometimes, honestly, for us emotional people. We tend to want to respond instantaneously instead of taking a walk or thinking how this person's going to respond to the manner in which that you really want to respond. You know what I'm talking about? Where if somebody dances on your last nerve and you want to just lunge at them with all fours, claws extended, you just want to attack. But if you stop and think about it, that response is not going to be healthy for anybody in the situation at all to respond in that way. However, there's an exception. There is a demographic called the choleric temperament, choleric, choleric temperament, the choleric personality, the outgoing, the alpha males, alpha females, the my way of the highway type people. Those are the people that is the exception, whereby you have to be in their face and direct all the time, because that's how they respond. That's what they react to. That's who they are. But that's the exception. Number 6. Susan Young has some recommendations. Put your ego aside. Put your ego aside. Allow another person to triumph and ignore the spotlight. That is one really cool thing that I've learned from coaches for many, many years, is the coach is not the one on the field. The coach is not the one on the court. The coach is not the one that's, hitting the bat, hitting the ball and getting touchdowns. No. The coach's job is to help the teammates excel. Now, what if you and I saw ourselves as coaches instead of players sometimes? Yes, you want to be on the field sometimes, but there are times in your life when maybe you and I can leverage our knowledge and our experiences for the benefit of other people around us, where then we step back and give them a chance to shine. And that's a very interesting way of looking at things, because like Ms. Young says, that it's time sometimes for us to put our ego aside and realize that life's not all about us. It's really not, if you stop and think about it. It should be about other people in our lives. Number 7, be aware and concerned for the feelings of others. I've worked in situations whereby some of the people that were in charge of those workplaces had no concern whatsoever about the feelings of other people. I was in an office a long time ago, 30 years ago now, that the boss of this particular office that I was in my 20s back then, decided that everybody in the office was going to contribute to this particular organization. He demanded it, in fact. Everybody was going to have payroll deducted, this money from their own paychecks, not his paycheck, everybody's paychecks to be donated to this organization. Well, at the time, I didn't believe certain things that this organization was doing mirrored my beliefs at the time. So I, a 20-something-year-old, stood up to the boss, which was probably twice my age at the time. Still is twice my age. I'm not working in that office anymore, but the point is that he came over to my desk one day and literally yelled and screamed at me why I wasn't going to sign this payroll deduction form for some of my money to go to this organization that I didn't believe in? Was he concerned for my feelings? Did he try to identify my why? Did he even ask questions why I decided not to do this? No. He just wanted 100% participation in that office. So I'm wondering if you and I would be a little more patient sometimes with people in our lives to discover the why behind what they do and why they do it. Because I would think that more people, once we understand the why behind what people do, the more we're going to understand what they're doing. Let me say it again. The more you and I understand why certain people do certain things in their lives, we will then understand the why they do certain things. Back to Susan Young. Number 8. Purposely seek ways to put others at ease and make them feel comfortable. Again, purposely seek ways to put others at ease and make them feel comfortable. You and I have the obligation, I think, if you stop and think about it from day to day, to reach out and lift other people up to put them at ease. That's what leaders, true leaders, really do. They decide to lift people up around them and realize that, you know what, it's not about me, it's not about the leader, it's not about the boss, it's not about the manager. A true leader cares more about the feelings and the efforts and the goals and the dreams of those around them than theirs. Because what happens is, as Zig Ziglar said very, very well, and I'll try to paraphrase his quote, is that when we care more about other people and invest us, our wisdom, our knowledge, our experiences, our love, our compassion into other people, as they reach their goals, we're going to reach our goals too. But our focus has to be on them first and only them for the long haul. Germany Kent wrote one time, don't hang out with people who are ungrateful, unhelpful, unruly, unkind, unloving, unambitious, or make you feel uncomfortable. You and I, if we want to win with people, that we have to surround ourselves with people that are, frankly, trying to go places in life that's positive and not negative at all. So John Maxwell wrote a book some years ago, How to Win with People. So I want to share a couple of concepts from John Maxwell's book, How to Win with People. He calls one the mirror principle. Let me share his words. People unaware of who they are and what they do often damage relationships with others. The way to change that is to look in the mirror. Consider these truths that we must learn about ourselves. Number 1, this is again John Maxwell's words right now. Self-awareness. Human nature seems to endow people with the ability to size up everybody in the world but themselves. Self-image. Your image of yourself restricts, listen, your image of yourself restricts your ability to build healthy relationships. A negative self-image will keep a person from being successful. So the first half of this show, I'm talking about other people, how other people deal with things. This half of the show, I want to talk about how you deal with things. John Maxwell says, he talks then about self-honesty. Comedian Jack Parr quipped, looking back, my life seems like one big obstacle race, with me being the chief obstacle. What can save us is in a willingness to get honest about our shortcomings, faults, and problems. Self-improvement, John Maxwell writes. Critic Samuel Johnson advised that he who has so little knowledge of human nature as to seek happiness by changing anything but his own disposition is a waste of fruitless efforts and multiplies the grief with his purpose to remove. Man, that's deep, complicated, but it's really not. It's up to us to really understand ourselves first. Then when you and I understand ourselves and invest the time to kind of critique why you do certain things, then you're able to grow from that to a point of serving other people in your own life. Again, back to John Maxwell's words. Self-responsibility. No significant accomplishments can be achieved by individual effort. I say this all the time on my shows. Maxwell says, however, every significant accomplishment begins with the vision of one individual. Once we possess the vision, we must take responsibility to carry it out to others. Then Maxwell talks about the pain principle. German poet Hermann Rees wrote, quote, if you hate a person, you hate something in him that is part of yourself. What isn't part of ourselves doesn't disturb us. When hurting people lash out, it is in response to what's happening inside them. Listen, I want to highlight this sentence. When hurting people lash out, it is in response to what is happening inside them more than what's happening around them. Let me say that one more time. When hurting people lash out, it is in response to what's happening inside them more than what's happening around them. They feel or believe something negative within themselves, he writes. The problem is that people who don't believe in themselves will never succeed, and they will also keep those around them from succeeding. John Maxwell he boils that phrase down to hurting people hurt people. Hurting people hurt people. Let me just pause for just a minute. Sometimes, many times, when you hurt people in your life, if you really stop and think about it, when you hurt people in your own life, it's the pain that's coming out of your soul, out of your being, out of your mind, out of your heart, that's lashing out because somebody hit something in your mind, in your heart, that's painful. The older I'm getting, I'm realizing that I have to be much more careful about my responses. Because many people do not know the level of pain that you have in your life, which then they're not going to understand why you're reacting in the way you're reacting. They don't know what happened last week. They don't know what happened 37 years ago that caused you to feel the way you feel. They just see this aggression, this negative something coming out of you that they have no clue what they did to cause that eruption of emotion. Maybe you need to deal with that pain of the past. Again, I'm talking to me too here today. To deal with the pain of that past so that when somebody hits that scab, that emotional bruise that you're still dealing with, then it's not going to be the kind of response that it has been over the last many, many years. Because you've identified that pain and been able to either heal it or mend it or set it or something where it's not as dramatic of a response when somebody hits that pain. So John Maxwell shares another concept about dealing with people. He calls it the hammer principle. He says, psychologist Abraham Maslow observed, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. Let me share it again. If the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. People require more judicious treatment than that. When little things bother us, our primary objective must be putting our personal agendas aside and building relationships. When tempted to use overkill, the following 4 T's can help temper your behavior, just like I was talking about a few minutes ago. He says, number 1, total picture. If you come to conclusions long before the problem has been detailed, you should listen, ask questions, listen again, ask more questions, then listen some more, then respond. How many times haven't you responded to stuff without having all the facts? Yikes. Ouch. Again, how many times haven't you responded negatively to a stimulus, to a conversation, to a situation, without having all the facts? Been there, done that. I think you probably have too. Timing, number 2, John Maxwell writes. Noted hostess and writer Lady Dorothy Neville observed, listen, quote, the real art of conversation is not only to say the right thing in the right place, but to leave unsaid the wrong thing at that tempting moment. Let me share it again. The real art of conversation is not only to say the right thing at the right place, listen, but to leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment. Here's been my experience lately in my life. I have been faced with some events, I'll leave it at that, some events that seemed on the outside that certain things happened. And the temptation for me, to be transparent, is to explode on the situation with the assumption that I know the facts based on pieces of a story. But I didn't know it was pieces. I thought it was the whole story. So my temptation is to respond in a way that is dramatic and not always positive. So lately, I've decided to step back a little bit from the stimulus, the response of what was going on at that moment, to take the time to get the whole picture, the whole event, to put all the pieces together and not just fractions or pieces of the puzzle. When that happens, more times than not, it gives me a little time to cool off, and more importantly, it gives me the whole picture. So what if I would have responded in a way based on pieces of a puzzle? I've done that dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times, to my embarrassment over the years, to my fault, to my shame, to my embarrassment, to my humiliation. Hello. Whereby I've responded in a way that has not been appropriate to the situation at the time because I didn't have all the facts. I would suggest to you that you and I both maybe need to step back from an event or a series of events for us in order to get the whole story before we respond. And then many times that gives us time to cool off and to deal with the situation at hand in a more logical and less emotional manner. Back to John Maxwell. He talks about tone, T-O-N-E. People often respond to our attitudes and actions more than our words. Many petty conflicts occur because people use the wrong tone of voice. People use the wrong tone of voice. How many conversations have you been in that you assumed the person was mad at you, but they were actually excited, or they always talk loud, or they are very animated people and they're just like this, and you wonder why they're talking like this. You think they're mad, but they talk that way all the time to people. But at first look, you think, holy moly, you think they're screaming at you because they're upset. No, they're just animated. They're just loud and all kind of stuff like that. And then you deal with people in the opposite extreme that are like, they talk really low and you think they're discouraged and they don't understand why they're doing this, but this is who they are anyway. So your perception needs to be not only based on the words, but the tonality of how people are talking to you. So when you and I look at people in our own lives, we have a choice to either to allow people to dominate where we're going to be going in life, or to identify the why behind what people are doing, what they're saying, how they're saying it, in order to get to the whole picture of the puzzle to help identify some areas in your life that you can learn from and help people learn from in their life as well. So in my life, I've been trying to find ways to lift other people up around me more consistently. And that tends to be 95% of the time what true leaders do. Leaders come alongside people in their lives. Mind you, they're the proactive ones. They don't wait for people to come around them. They go around other people for the purpose of lifting other people up, for the purpose of encouraging people in their lives. With, by the way, no expectation of anything in return. Think about that a second. This is not a transaction here. I'm not talking about a transaction. I'm talking about giving for the sake of giving, about learning the why behind what people do for the sake of serving them. You don't hear that word too often these days about serving other people. But the older you and I get, maybe we should reconsider why we're here in the first place. And maybe one of those whys is to serve other people in our lives consistently, to get ourselves out of our own little bubble, our own little world, that life doesn't necessarily have to revolve only around you, because really it's more about other people and less about you. At least that's the way it should be. Roberta Gilbert wrote, "People frequently point to communication as a problem because it's easy to notice, but usually it's a symptom of an underlying problem with a relationship posture." Think about that a second. People are going to base their reaction to what you're doing and what you're saying based on their past. Again, people are going to respond to you based on their past. Guess what? we tend to respond to people based on our past. So if your past isn't dealt with correctly, then you're going to carry that baggage, that pain, that agony, that wrong communication style to the people in your life today and certainly into the future, and then you're not going to be able to help anybody in your life around you. I'm asking you today to learn what you need to learn about how to deal with people consistently and in a proactive way, in a way that serves them. Because when you do that, man, the world that you are going to see in your life every day is going to be so much bigger, because you're going to be able to look at people walking down the street and realize they all have baggage. They all have stories. They all have pain in their life. They all react in a way that's based on their past. So if you and I can leverage our past as a learning experience, learn how to deal with people, learn how to win with people, man, your life's going to be dramatically different in a very, very good way within 1 year, I guarantee it. My name's John Carver. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back real soon.